And I am going to introduce Christy King from New York City Parks and going to talk about some of the restoration work that they've been doing for a long time now. Great history here in New York City Parks of the types of restoration techniques we're here to learn about today. So, Christy, you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Right.
Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy King. I'm the chief of the Natural Resources Group at New York City Parks. I've been at Parks for 17 years. I've been in my current role for about a year and a half, and I'm really excited to speak with you all today about the natural world in New York City on our parkland and what we do to care for it. And what I'll really kind of dig into is how we prioritize that work and the information we use to decide what to tackle. So for those of you that aren't familiar, I like to say that New York City is surprisingly green. 12% of our land cover from a bird's eye view is natural landscapes. So not just green, but like actually wild or spontaneous vegetation really is what we mean, like not mown lawn with canopy. And then of that 12%, we have a significant amount of natural areas. You can see forests, wetlands, and grasslands here. We really are a city with a lot of coastlines, so wetlands play a big role. And New York City Parks owns a lot of this natural habitat, about half of it. And other landowners in the city include NPS and there's state land as well, state parks and federal parks, as well as New York City Parks. So this is kind of where they are. New York City parkland is in light green, and then natural areas are in dark green. So you really see them in the outer fringes of the outer boroughs, but many of our flagship parks, as we call them, like Flushing Meadows Corona Park, Van Cortlandt Park, like iconic city parks, include significant natural areas. So there's really an opportunity for almost anyone who lives in New York City to visit a natural area without driving. You can take public transit to them. So we view that as really critical. Like they may be kind of small in the grand scheme of things and somewhat fragmented, but the value for New Yorkers, many of who may not get to experience nature outside of the city, we find that this is very, very important for them, for us, really, including me. So amazingly, it looks like this. This is Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, not too far from here. Many of you might be familiar. Here's another beautiful maritime shrubland. This is in the Jamaica Bay region of New York City. I think this photo is from Marine Park in Brooklyn, Brooklyn's largest park. We also have lots of really unique wetland systems, as I mentioned, including 66 miles of streams that flow through our woodlands. So we have a lot of good riparian habitat, lots of cool freshwater wetlands, including kettle ponds formed by glaciers, and really unique topography and landscape as a result of where we are, you know, right. The ice sheet stopped right in the middle of New York City. So we have a real diversity of ecotypes from the kind of northern rocky stuff that you see up here all the way down to like glacial outwash and like sandy maritime forests. Also, they look like this though. This is probably a site that's maybe familiar to some of you. This is in Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx, also not that far from here, but a bit more east. This is a porcelain berry vineland. You can also see like we have a lot of remnants of interesting former land use, right? Like a street sign in the middle of the woods. You'll also see like lamp posts sometimes. Really like a lot of our natural areas are like overgrown estates maybe that were transferred to parkland or filled wetlands that were then allowed to just spontaneously grow vegetation. So we have a lot of this, you know, vines grow, tree falls down, and it just kind of keeps going from there. Something I imagine very familiar to many of you. Also this, like, is this a natural area or like a forest even? It's a mugwort field, but we do, you know, a lot of our kind of mapped natural areas do look like this. So we're always thinking about like, what's the goal here? Like, what's the endpoint? Does this provide habitat? Should we be doing something else? What should we do? What's the soil like? Like really kind of big questions related to former land use, current disturbance, and we sadly have a lot of monocultures and dumping. This little box in the corner is like small compared to some of the things we see in terms of historic dumping in our parkland. So I'm a proud member and the current proud leader of the Natural Resources Group. We think that we're the largest municipal conservation oldest municipal conservation organization in the country. Been around since 1984. This year is our 40th anniversary. We just on Friday had a huge conference and celebration at the New York Botanical Gardens. Some of you are there. I see you, John. Hi. And we really use that as a time to kind of celebrate everything we've learned over the past 4 decades and like think about what we need to do now, like what challenges we face now. And really, I'd say some of the like big themes that we're thinking about now are like engaging the public in our work and bringing people into natural areas to make sure they realize that it's for them. Like it's not like some preserve that's off limits. Like this is parkland that's meant for recreation and we want people to use it, enjoy it, and hopefully like demand its care and health. So we've been doing this for a while. Not me, not that long, but we've had a lot of different kind of phases of work, starting with like exploration and identification of the parkland that we have. And then a lot of our early restoration work was funded through environmental damages. The photo on the upper right is from an oil spill in the New York Harbor that actually resulted in a settlement where we started really our like big efforts for salt marsh restoration, including seed collection all the way to planting and restoration. Our early forest restoration work was in the 90s, really led by Tim Wenskis, who's in the room today. That was our first kind of big effort where we learned a lot about how to restore forests in the urban context. And then this last photo is from the Million Trees Initiative, which many of you may have heard of. It was a 10-year initiative where we planted 1 million trees in New York City, engaged thousands and thousands of volunteers, and half of those trees went into natural forests in New York City. So this is like what we do. You know, we have these goals. They're high-level goals: maintain and manage our biodiversity. We have a lot of rare plants in New York City. We have really high biodiversity, especially if you include all the invasives. There's just like a lot of different species there, you know? It's that like disturbance thing that leads to high diversity, right? So we maintain and manage our biodiversity. Managing and expanding our urban forest canopy is a goal. We actually are just embarking on an urban forest planning effort for the city to get us from 22% canopy cover up to 30. So that's going to be the next like several years of effort is going to go into that. And then preserve rare and unique species and habitats. Like I mentioned before, we have a lot of kind of unique little pockets like the kettle ponds and the vernal pools I mentioned. We also have serpentine grasslands in New York City. That's a globally rare ecosystem. So these little special things, we want to try to hold on to them as best we can. But like all of these goals involve invasive species management. So they, you know, none of them say invasive species management, but really underlying each of them, this is like a major activity that we perform. So I like to think we know what we're doing. We've published a lot of literature on how we do this work. So all of this is publicly available. I'd love to get some of this like maybe linked on the new website, or we want people to really use these resources. This is a document we lovingly were calling the cookbook for many years while we were working on it. It's really a nuts and bolts, like how to manage and restore urban forests. A lot of case studies, and yeah, this is available on our website to download as a PDF. It talks everything from like assessment and like setting up monitoring plots to like best practices for pesticides, like really like anything you might think of. We also produce a native species planting guide that comes out on a regular cadence. That's a local law that was established several years ago, and I think fourth edition is coming out either this year or next, but this is also available on our website, and it includes it's organized by like like in most native species planting guides, organized by like tolerances and also plant communities. So if you know you're planting in a certain type of place, we'll provide the whole suite of recommendations. Our plant ecologist, Clara Holmes, who many of you may know, really works on this, and in conjunction with the Greenbelt Native Plant Center, our own nursery that also many of you may be familiar with. We've also produced a lot of management frameworks, several I'd say. There's a wetlands management framework for New York City. This is less nuts and bolts and more like big picture policy goals, but it does represent just when I say framework, it really to me means like we have an understanding of what's needed, where, and how much it costs. So these documents are meant to show that we have a plan. Our partners often use documents like this for advocacy. Like, look, they have a plan. Look, this is what it's going to cost. Like, look, this is how much money your council district needs to restore these wetlands. So it's really like less of a how-to and more of like a high-level plan with priorities, costs, et cetera. And then this one I'm going to dig into a bit now. I think this is maybe what most of you kind of work in, is managing upland landscapes. So the Forest Management Framework, both of these frameworks are a partnership with our nonprofit partner, the Natural Areas Conservancy. They were founded in 2012, really born out of the Parks Department to serve as a conservancy, not just for one park, but for all of the natural areas in New York City. So it's been a really great partnership for us, and this was like really maybe like the biggest thing to come out of it so far, I would say. So the Natural Areas Conservancy, when they started in 2012, their first big project was an ecological assessment of all of our natural areas. So when Brent mentioned like, oh, what do we do next? Like, you know, we're removing invasive species, but like, what's the plan? We really feel that like really knowing a lot about what you have is key to making a solid plan. They hired like 25 biologists. This was in 2013 and 2014, and assessed our uplands. You can this is Van Cortlandt Park, this map. That is, Van Cortlandt Park was sampled, ooh, it's like a wasp, yeah. Van Cortlandt Park was sampled a bit more densely than some of our other parks, but generally we did a random point in a 2-hectare grid, and then we did a 10-meter radius forest assessment plot in each grid. So you can see there how that was laid out. We did it across 65 parks, representing over 7,000 acres. You can see how many plots there were. It's a lot. So really, really scientific data collection, measuring each of the components of the forest listed here. I won't describe all of that, but a lot of data, like really a lot, more than we could really operationalize immediately, but it's been a really rich source of information that's kind of had a lot of interesting products I can talk about. But so from a management perspective, after we got this, we were like, okay, like what's the big picture? Like, what are we learning? So we learned that our forests are healthy but declining. Especially when you look at the canopy level, our forests in New York City are more like the forests up here than they are like other urban forests. The canopy trees are mostly native, they're large, they're old. So 76% of our forest canopy is native. But that nativeness kind of decreases as you move down through the forest layers. And we have a lot to manage at kind of the ground level and the mid-story level. So like I said before, very diverse, over 750 plant species. We worked with New York New York Natural Heritage, almost said National Heritage, New York Natural Heritage to establish the unique vegetation associations in New York City. So we have a key now to all of our unique vegetation communities, a dichotomous key, some of which, are ruderal ailanthus forests, but many others match with what you see throughout New York State. So now that's kind of been added to the New York State communities list. We have a lot of threats to our forests. Deer browse is a major problem, mostly on Staten Island, but also in the Bronx. That's like a whole other topic I could give a whole other talk on. We have a lot of debris dumping, trash, garbage, litter, just literally covering the ground. Regeneration is somewhat problematic and highly variable throughout our forests. Yeah.
Spread out through everything in the concentrated areas, or is it?
It's mostly spread out. This is like a weird way of measuring it. This is if you took all of it and put it together, but I'd say there are sites that are problems, like notorious, like, oh, they dumped a car over there again, but it's also a little bit everywhere. And it's generally tracks with where we see either really high use or like almost no use. And then the no use is more like neglect, like dumping, like, oh, I'll put all this stuff here because nobody goes here and they won't know. It's usually like contractor illegal dumping. And then in the high use areas, it's like party stuff, like beer cans, like whatever, candy wrappers, like kind of stuff like that. So it's highly variable. Yeah, feel free to interrupt with questions. I'm down to be casual like that. So yeah, regeneration is tough. Some people have been looking into that regionally, like Rich Hallett and Max Piana. If you guys know them, they've been doing a study on regeneration in this region. And there's a lot of kind of limitations that we're trying to understand, like seed herbivory, invasive species, deer. There's just like a lot of competing threats, I would say, that make it hard to know exactly what the issue is. Problem plants are prevalent. They're, invasive species are everywhere. We're not going for eradication. Hopefully that goes without saying, but eradication is not our goal in New York City. We're looking for balance. And then we're really moving into a like sweet gum and black cherry dominant forest. Like these kind of faster growing, shorter lived species seem to be becoming more dominant in our canopy. So it's like what we have is pretty good, but we really clearly saw that there were threats that needed to be managed. So this is kind of a summary of all of that data. And then we decided to distill it even more. And we worked together to define what we thought were key metrics for health and threat. So it's probably like kind of obvious, like health is that you want native species, a lot of them, a lot of different ones in all different parts of the forest, right? And then threats, you're looking for invasive species in the understory and all the other layers. But then we also looked at vines climbing on trees. Woody vines are a huge problem for us. For me, they feel like almost public enemy number one because they kill trees. Like if something is capable of killing a mature tree, like that is a problem, right? So that was another metric we added in. So we turn these into a Z-score, where you like combine all the metrics, divide it by the number of plots. It's like a very basic statistical analysis. And then every plot ends up with a score. So now this is all of those 1,400 plots I shared from that forest assessment. And this is what we called the forest condition matrix. So here we're able, really this was for the first time, to look at all of our forests on an even playing field. One thing I'll clarify is that because we have lots of diverse forest types, the health metrics were a bit different for each type of forest. Like for example, for maritime forests, you don't really expect to see a high basal area of canopy trees. That is not normal for that type of forest. So we didn't want to discount it or say it wasn't as healthy just because it didn't have that. So we did put some nuance into the health measures for each, for 4 different types of forest. This is all in the framework. You can read it, but threats are all the same for everyone. So, and then after we had this, it was like, wow, like eye-opening, you know, it's kind of normalized. So you can compare things to each other. And we decided to really prioritize the upper right quadrant. Those forests are high health, but high threat. So there's like, we stand to lose a lot, right? Like it's very healthy, but if we don't address the threats, we might lose that health and then it kind of backslides. But if we do manage the threats in a high health forest, it can move. Ideally, you would track its movement to the upper left quadrant where it's high health and low threat. And all that's really required is periodic monitoring to ensure that the forest remains healthy and very low intensity intervention by our staff. Otherwise, you know, we have this low health and high threat. Here's the lower right. That's the most degraded in New York City. They're usually completely dominated by invasive species. There may be no canopy, like that mugwort field, for example, or if a plot was right in the middle of that vineland that I showed. So this is where intensive management interventions are needed. Like we have to really clear everything and start from scratch. And that's like for us a capital project. Like when we have a big funding opportunity or a capital project, this is where we look because there's a lot of opportunity for tree planting and that's our capital asset. When we do capital projects in the forest, our like capital asset is trees. So we have to install a lot of them. We look to that lower right quadrant for the places we just like remove everything and build a new forest. Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I'm getting to the end. Forests and then this category is kind of like in the middle. Like maybe we've done management, but it hasn't gained its health yet, you know, like it could have been in the lower right. We've restored it, but the trees are really little. So you're not really getting the like forest health yet. So this is the way we prioritize our work and kind of understand places compared to each other. This is just aligning money with that. So like I said, we know how much everything costs. So the plan when it came out called for an investment of like $350 million over 25 years. In New York City money, that is like nothing, but we still haven't gotten it. So if you know anybody, just kidding. But like we know, like the high threat ones, the high threat acres are the most expensive and so on and so forth. So we can apply and these costs are new. We've updated the models because this was from 2018. Money has changed a lot since then, right? So we've updated our financial model to reflect higher salaries. You know, just the cost of doing business is much higher than it was back then.
For the costs, is that pretty?
Oh yeah, sorry, yes, it's per acre, cost per acre. And then, you know, if something starts in this high threat acreage, it doesn't immediately go all the way down. Like things, as you guys know, things require continued management over time. So you kind of slowly move, say, a project area through, and then it still costs money each year. It's like per acre per year. So it still costs money each year, but less money as you get toward a healthier outcome. So I'm just going to run through a few slides from like a photo. This is from a site, sorry, in Alley Pond Park in Queens. This is a major restoration project. So low health, high threat. I mean, look at it. You're seeing multiflora rose, mugwort. Is that Paulownia? There's Phragmites. There's porcelainberry. Anyway, so here's before we started. This was right after clearing and actually right after planting. So sorry, that said 2016. This is a big jump to 2018. So when we plant, the trees are really small like that. We're now trying to do more of a mix of sizes to create structural complexity more quickly. But this was right after we planted here. This was that same year, but later on. This is after seeding, I think. That's what you're seeing there is the hay. We do herbaceous seeding in all of our big projects like this. This is in 2020. And this is in 2022. So like pretty cool, right? I love that photo session. It's anyway, to me, it's pretty obvious. And then this is in 2023. So really, I mean, we're creating diversity and there's volunteers too. Like I bet that willow in the middle there, we might not have planted that. Yeah. But mechanical and chemical. Yeah, we usually do mechanical first and then use chemical treatments on resprouting and regrowing invasives.
And what's for deer management after?
There's no deer here, yeah. So nice, right? Well, this was at the time. We are getting deer invading in all of the 5 boroughs, honestly, now. So there are supposedly deer in Alley Pond Park now. That it's really concerning to us, but here we had the luxury of no deer protection. But we install fence, we install guards and fence. All of our plants start at the Greenbelt Native Plant Center with seed that's wild collected by our team. For trees, we send the liners off to other nurseries that grow them up for us. Right now, we're working with Site One Nurseries, formerly Bissett on Long Island. And we've worked with Clear Ridge, Country Gardens, aka Long Island Natives is another one we've worked with. Yeah. And then all the shrubs come direct from Greenbelt Native Plant Center.
Industry contractors that know what you want, or have you had to like build that up over time?
We've had to build it up over time. Yeah, it started pretty strong, but you know, doing business with New York City from a contractual perspective is really challenging. So I hear. So we've had issues with contractors. They've had issues with us. We've lost some vendors. We've gained some vendors. It's been quite a roller coaster, I would say, over my time at Parks. Yeah. Alley Pond Park as a whole is like hundreds of acres, maybe 600 acres. Thanks, Tim. That restoration area was about 20 acres. Yeah. So the last thing I really wanted to say is that we find it really important to work with volunteers. Obviously, that project I just went through, we don't work with volunteers in the clearing, but at planting we do. Even in a big contractor site, we bring in volunteers to do the planting. This is something that's really important to us. There's a whole team at the Natural Resources Group that's all about volunteer engagement. And we try to bring people in to every step of the restoration process. And we generally engage 6,000 to 8,000 volunteers every year in New York City. That's it. That's the end. Oh, yeah. If I have time for one question, maybe, yeah.
The install at Alley Pond and what funding is allotted to maintenance and for how long?
Yeah, that project overall cost about $1.5 million. And the maintenance costs and allocation was just current staff. And we've lost a lot of staff, so the maintenance costs and that, talk about a roller coaster. That has been the hardest part. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Christy, that was fantastic. With presentations like that have so much detail and so much history, I'm sure you have 1,000 questions. So there is going to be mingling time later. Everyone knows Christy's face now, so feel free to find her later in the day as we eat lunch, etc. And the same goes with all our presenters. We're now going to turn things over to Jess Schuler from Westchester County Parks in Laston. I just need to get the presentation loaded and we'll get started.
Say that I draw not handouts, but examples of the printouts of what Christy shared because they're staples on my bookshelf. So I'll leave them here. You can have a look at them. This is an older version of the native species planting guide. We have the forest management framework that's just coming out of its binding.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, promoting Christine's work. One thing too, it's an oldie but goodie, American Plants for American Gardens. So if you don't know this one, definitely
Let me just screen share.
perfect for our region as well. Mistaken identity. Feel free to look out even longer.
All right, turn things over to Jess. Chrissy's gonna get her all set up to
Oh,
record.
boy. I didn't realize we had to do this.
Anybody wants to sit, there's your first.
Yes.
That is
Got
all
cat
right,
half today.
speak into it. Hello?
Okay, everyone, thanks so much for coming today. So Brent sort of asked me to talk about ecological restoration and sort of what it means for our region and trying to scale up what Christy and her crew is doing in New York City to our region, right? So it's a lot. And one of the reasons why we're here and we're having this discussion at our PRISM, our Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, is that in 2018, when the state revised their comprehensive invasive species management plan, we all celebrated, all of us in the restoration field, because the state was showing priorities to recover ecosystem resilience and to actually do restoration work. And we're seeing more and more of that. And I'm thrilled, and I think Brent is as well, to be getting it directly from his contacts at the DEC. So this is sort of the foundation of where we are today. Those of you who don't know, the ecological restoration is the process of which a ecosystem goes through recovery, right? And it's one that has been damaged, degraded, or destroyed. And that is defined by the International Society for Ecological Restoration. So if you aren't already a member, please join, or at least be aware that those resources exist internationally, and it's broken up by region. And we cross 2 regions here. We can participate in 2 chapters, the Mid-Atlantic, as well as New England, and they welcome New Yorkers all around, both of them. I wanted to also mention, you know, this is the hope in our work, right? We can get bogged down, and I think Robin Wall Kimmerer says it best, that ecological restoration can be viewed as an act of reciprocity in which humans exercise their caregiving responsibility for the ecosystem that sustains them. We restore the land and the land restores us. And this is our hope, right? This is what we do every day. I'm preaching to the choir here. So ecological restoration, the Society of Ecological Restoration developed these 6 concepts, right? Where we flow through and what it is. Ideally, we want, as Christy showed in her forest management framework, we want to put in the least amount of effort to get the most recovery. And it's not permanent. It's not like we're going to be there forever, right? We want it to flow, and we want it to have its own recovery, and with our least amount of input. That is ultimately the goal. And it's a continuum, right? So we don't know exactly where it's going to go. There's always going to be consequences, and there's going to be surprises. And we're not going back. We're shifting a trajectory, and we're moving in a continuum, and it's okay, right? And so one thing I like to tell people who are just starting out, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. We are doing the best we can with the resources and the knowledge we have at the time of restoration. And it's okay. And we're going to learn and we're going to share that information because partnerships and conversations are key. And so many of you here have heard this a little bit, but trust me, the story has gotten longer. So I just wanted to say where my origin to restoration came from was when I worked at the New York Botanical Garden. And we had this incredible Thane family forest that now John is the steward of. And really our goals were to prevent future invasions, right? Very much so like our PRISM. We wanted to reduce or contain existing populations of invasive species. We wanted to promote native regeneration, improve habitat with our management. And also we were exploring with reintroducing some extirpated species as well. So that was sort of our goal back in 2008. And we came to this goal through data-driven adaptive management. Similar to what Christy did with her team, though different. You know, we were operating as a private nonprofit on city parkland, but we're managing it and we were the stewards of it. So we developed this forest inventory program, and our active management was we did our inventory every 5 years. We analyzed the data, we established priorities and management, figured out at the time what the best management practices were, which involves lots of conversations, as we all know, like our partnership here. We would restore those areas by planting native plants, and we would repeat. And a lot of this is derived from that guidelines and forest restoration that Christy mentioned. And this is one of the great diagrams that I always like to refer to that they created, because what we do is restoration implementation and active management. So it's informed by the ecologists and all of that data, but we can do our own monitoring and then track our restoration and our progress through time. And so the saga of the Amur cork tree planted at NYBG in 1895, seeding in to the Thane family forest. In 2006, it was starting to grow exponentially in the canopy, and we were concerned. We knew the forest wasn't going to be dominantly native for future generations if we didn't do anything. So we took action. We actually got rid of all of the Amur cork tree in the canopy. We partnered with Christy and Tim and Million Trees in New York City parks and planted thousands of trees and shrubs in those canopy gaps. We then had to follow through with active management in those canopy gaps because the seed bank released. It was a lot of fun to manage. But again, we had 50 acres. We have 3 full-time people out there every day, plus volunteers and support. So it's really, compared to per acre, it's a luxury. And then we realized that after Million Trees, or like as we were evolving our program, that we could collect our own seed, we could grow our own plants. So this is some of our seed tarps under trees, collecting seed. We sowed them, mimicked the forest floor. Those are all oak trees. And then we would put them back out. And we did make a difference. So there's no eradication. That wasn't the goal. Containment was. And so we believe that for the future, our efforts were worthwhile. And continuing onward, so I haven't been at NYBG for 5 years, but Elliot, who was there, he repeated the inventory in 2001. And this is what he's showing, the shift of species within the canopy. And so we're predominantly red maple now, which is really interesting. And so Christy had mentioned black cherry. So there are some hot spots of black cherry, and then sweet gum here for us didn't make it into his analysis, which is interesting.
That just got published this year.
Yes, it did. So I can send that around, share the paper. But one thing I do want to point out is this quote, which just like made me so happy that he wrote in here: the increase in the proportion of understory native species is contradictory to regional studies, which suggests that increase in non-native species dominance of urban forests over time, right? That's what we see as the trend, but we started restoration before Sandy hit. And I think that was huge. These results highlight the value of adaptive management and support continued investments in conservation, management, and monitoring of urban forests region-wide. So that is huge. And one of the other things we did at the forest, and this was in partnership with Leah Johnson, who's now at Longwood Gardens, we looked at the soil seed bank. Has anybody here ever dug up a couple of trowelfuls of soil from an area you're managing and grown it out? Some people have. Excuse me. It's very surprising. It's usually, at least from our experience in the Thane Family Forest, was not what we were actively managing. It was very different. So it's just something to also be aware of, that what is dormant in the seed bank is not directly related to what you see above. And that was something we learned. And so what does that 50-acre forest in the Bronx mean to our region, right? So this is a study that Jason Munchie South, who was at Fordham University, who was an evolutionary biologist, he was studying white-footed mice in New York City. And what this shows is we have Pelham Bay, which is over here. We have NYBG here. We have Van Cortlandt Park. And then over here, we have Inwood Hill Park. And all of the white or the gray shows gene flow from these populations of these little mice. So he sampled little tips of their tails from each of these forest patches, sequenced their DNA to see how they were all related. And so this got me thinking, it's like, okay, if these little mice can have gene flow across these fragments or these highly urbanized forest patches, what are the plants doing? Right? Like there is connectivity. Everything is connected, right? And that's what we too are finding in our partnerships. So we look at one forest patch, that we may be responsible for, but then we also communicate with others and we work together. And that's when, in 2019, we actually teamed up with the Natural Areas Conservancy and Christy, and we did what they call their rapid site assessment in an area of the NYBG forest that wasn't part of our inventory. So they were able to take our inventory data and analyze it, but then we also sampled using this assessment. So it's a way for a land manager to go out and sit and get plot-based data to understand what we have and then to move forward with a plan. And so this is the type of information we got from that rapid site assessment and collaborating. And this was part of it's called a conservancy engagement program. So Christy had mentioned that half of the forested areas of New York City or the natural areas of New York City are managed by people other than or organizations other than New York City Parks. So we had the Bronx River Forest involved, we had the Bronx River Alliance involved, and we teamed up to do this. So you get information like what forest communities you have based on their forest health matrix, what level intensity or what kind of restoration are we going to need to do? What investments are required? What is the invasives, the upcoming invasives in the mid-story, right? And what is the degree in these different plots? Where are the vines? That was one thing that we found in communicating with them and analyzing our data, is that in our inventory data, we had presence and absence of vines. We didn't directly have invasive vines growing on trees. And that was a gap in the Thane Family Forest inventory data. And as we all know, that's a huge threat. And so those forest patches, right? I always like to use from the watershed, the hydrological cycle, right? And thinking about the connectivity here is, did anybody ever hear George Profis call trees the rivers to the sky? So that's what I always think of, right? So this is what we have, and this is what we want to protect, and this is what we all work to protect every day. And we do this through partnerships, and I guess a map didn't show up there. But anyway, so Hudson to Housatonic is an organization that we've been really collaborating with to think about our mapping and how things are connected in that lower Hudson Valley, right? And also crossing political jurisdictions into Connecticut, right? So me as Westchester County Parks, I can go out and sample in the Bronx River. I could do things on the Bronx River north of the Bronx line, right? And same thing with Christy. She can do stuff in the Bronx south of the Bronx line. So we have to have these partnerships and these conversations to be able to do landscape level analysis and conversation. Oh, there it is. It was just. So these are 3 examples of partnering across at the landscape scale. And so I'm excited to say that we actually piloted this year, myself and Charlotte Brennan and Leah Cass of our conservation division, a rapid site assessment study along the Bronx River corridor. And so we have about 400 plots we need to sample. We have about 331 remaining for 2025. So this is my plug. If you want to come out and learn how to do the rapid site assessment, we can sign you up. We'll start in June of 2025. But really the goal is to develop a long-term restoration plan for the Bronx River, riparian forest and corridor from Westchester County's headwaters all the way south in the Bronx. Just from our sampling, we had quite a diverse set of landscapes in those 50 or so plots we visited this season, from Phragmites to, finding an oak, oak seedlings are germinating despite deer pressure, which is amazing, right? To these floodplain forests with skunk cabbage, or this sort of forested wet swale, which was incredible, to wet meadows, which were highly diverse. So plot by plot is extremely diverse and totally different. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what we find.
How large are the plots?
The plots are 20-meter diameter, circular.
So if people wanted to join you next year, it would be, you do a couple, and how many in a day?
So we were 2 of us. We were getting, as we were getting our groove on, 10 to 11 in a day.
Wow.
So we were able to, I set it as average 9,
And just as a plug to the partnership, I think it's like these opportunities when other land managers are working on this kind of stuff and you want to learn, like, feel free to advertise and we can put it out there like, hey, come visit us. We're going out to do these plots. If anyone wants to join us, you can learn the process and then you can do it on your own property. So
yeah, for sure. So there's lots of resources. So Christy shared that a lot. I put them there. And so this is the most recent native species planting guide. The Society for Ecological Restoration has a certification program. I recommend looking into it if you're interested. I really have found, at least in our area too, the forest identification and restoration selection tool, or the online key that the Natural Areas Conservancy and New York City Parks have created, to be super helpful, because that allows you to actually be at your site, key it out, say, okay, what do I have? And then establish your goals and your planting plan. Like, that's a great starting place. Also, the Natural Areas Conservancy is working with cities across the nation. So they have a Forest and Cities website with incredible resources, including the rapid site assessment protocol, which I have printed out there. If you want to have a look at it, it's available online. New York State is working on their reforestation plan, and that's going to be coming out hopefully later this year or beginning of next year. And until 2030, we are in the UN decade of ecological restoration. So just a heads up, like, we're right in time with everything happening internationally. So this is just an example of what the first tool looks like. And you can run through that on your phone when you're out in the field. It's an awesome resource. It then links directly to planting palettes that are recommended and are derived from the U.S. Forest Service Climate Change Atlas, right? So Forest Service is doing a lot of work for modeling of what's going to be doing well and where. And so I highly recommend this. One spreadsheet that I love and I pulled from the Climate Change Atlas is urban area number 63217, which is New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So that gives us the species for our area and things we should be thinking about planting and working into our restoration plan. We are also partnering with the U.S. Forest Service in this urban silviculture and climate resilience study that Chrissy did mention briefly, where we have in, it's beech, right? Is it beech groves? So Taro has been working with them in our beach leaf disease plots, right, to be planting in the understory of our forests here. And I have also been working with them. We have an oak orchard at Lasden where we planted ecotypes from Baltimore all the way up to, Springfield, thank you, Massachusetts, of white oak, and then also looking at ecotypes of chestnut oak to see how different ecotypes perform, like what will be best here. And then the idea is that what does perform well and eventually grows to seed-bearing age, we can then collect from that and use in our propagation in the countywide tree nursery. So they have very similar alignment looking at these threats. So there's limited natural regeneration in our forests, right? We have high deer abundance and browse. We have these frequent gap creations, whether it's from storms, right? Or invasive species like beech leaf disease. There are also, we're up against sort of this public perception of management that we're interfering or not enough. And so there's a lot of that and a lot of need for engaging people. One thing I want to also mention is that the Society for Ecological Restoration and their guidelines say you have to work with your constituents of any property. It's not just the property owner, it's the people who use it or are neighboring it. And so that's something we too are trying to do more and more of. So what does this all mean and what are we doing? So to do restoration successfully, we need to do things like grow plants and have them available. The horticulture trade does not have everything we need available, and it's not necessarily seed grown. And so here we come to Hilltop, which you all are going to tour in a little bit. But we've developed this native plant program here starting in 2020 to collect seed from Westchester County parks to then grow plants out in these increased plots on the farm. And then, there we go. And to clean the seed and work as a community of practice and get the seed back into parks, and then also to our partners and folks across the county. And so this is what we've been doing here. And it has evolved to more of a regional partnership that happened organically back in 22, thank you. Where we found that all these people were doing similar things. They said, okay, let's get together. We all need this seed. Let's work together. And so we're working across ecoregion 59, which is the northeastern coastal zone. And we bring people together, whether they are growers or restoration practitioners, researchers, botanists. And we have priority species that we're collecting and trying to get them into the trade and available to everybody, because we need the seed to do our restoration effectively. And there's a shortage here, especially in the Northeast. You know, this traditionally was driven by the Bureau of Land Management out west, right? Where lots of federal lands needed seed, and they had bulk seed storage for those federal lands in case of fires or big disasters. Here in the Northeast, we don't have those huge federal lands. We rely on our partnerships and working together. And that's how this naturally evolved. So Local 59 Plant Network, I think our next event, we can send it out to the partnership. We'll be at Lasden. We're going to do a soup and seed swap in December 6th. We'll share that, but definitely you can sign up on the website. Right now we're hosted by the Ecotype Project, which was the originating project that was funded by Connecticut NOFA to start this farmer-led collaborative of growing seed as crops. And today you can go on here and look at our Northeast Seed Network map. And so Local 59 is part of a larger initiative that's being run by the Native Plant Trust and the Ecological Health Network to do this seed increase for the entire Northeast. And so you can go on here and you can find who's a restoration practitioner, who is a supplier, what species are available, who has seed, who has plants. And so this is just in the very first year. And we're expecting that come December, January, February, more data is going to be put in to, include everything that people have grown and collected this year. So just stay tuned and know that this is a resource for you if you're doing restoration work. And really, it isn't, the problems we face today are so great, right? And we see it every day in our work, but it's really these partnerships and stewardship and collectives together is how we can make a difference. And I find that participatory science has been incredible, especially with technology just in the last decade or two. It really has revolutionized how we've looked at things. Like, who here uses iNaturalist? There you go. Need I say more? And this is ultimately, especially being at Westchester County's farm, this is what we're working towards, right? So we restore the earth, the land helps restore us and keep us healthy. We have food systems, we have water. This is part of the bigger picture and what we need to have a more climate resilient future. So thank you. And I think that's it.
All right. I mean, it's so inspirational. This is a great start to the day to see how different organizations are coming together to work on these things. And again, that communication across boundaries and borders is so key. And that's why gatherings like this are so important. And again, I'm sure you have more questions now than you even had before you came. But again, this is an opportunity to see who are the movers and shakers in certain aspects of our work, and to make sure that you follow up with them afterwards, and we'll provide the resources to you as to how to access these websites, access people to help answer questions, et cetera, to start working together. I know it's time to get up and move, and we're a little behind schedule, but I always build in time for the lunch period you can spill over for questions, things like that. So Adam, do you want to? It's a natural transition. I'm sure we can ask Jess questions during the talk too, because the end of that presentation really leads very well into this next part. And feel free to ask any questions you have on that now. How do you want to structure this?
I figured we could just all go outside for tours, and we can split up into a couple smaller groups from there.
Okay.
What time do you want us all?
So I get one every year. So if you see me and you're like, have you given away yet? I haven't. So it's a great opportunity to get involved in that if you are doing anything wildlife related. So those are my two announcements.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, I don't.
This is working.
Yeah, we got to get rid of that. You were able to do that before. So get it out. Good enough. Okay. All right, going to turn it over to Linda to talk about some of the ongoing restoration projects and going with Wildwoods Restoration Project. I'm sure you all know Linda, and I'll just turn it over to you. Go for it.
Brent, which,
Oh yeah, so just to advance, you're just gonna hit, this is fine.
that one? Okay.
No, no. How about this? This really should work though. There, I don't know, it's working now.
All right. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Relator. I'm the founder and president of Wildwoods Restoration Project. And what we do, we're a nonprofit. We were founded in 2022 with the mission to restore the health and diversity of our Hudson Valley forests with plants that are local, ecotype, grown by volunteers. So we're all volunteer organization with one part-time employee right now. And we're focused on forest understories. We partner with parks in an effort to restore forests. And our current partners are Black Rock Forest, Hudson Highlands Land Trust, Hanover Land Conservancy, the Land Conservancy of New Jersey, and Gloucester Nature Center, that's in New Jersey, as well as state parks. We're working in Farnstock and the Old Croton Aqueduct.
I'm trying to read it. Sorry.
Okay. Now it won't go.
Next one.
Nope.
Love it.
And
All right.
just to tie it to restoration, our restoration principles is we want to use local ecotype seeds. That has always been a difficulty of finding plants and that are grown from local ecotype seed, or even from finding the seeds. We also want to understand what community we're working with and putting the right plants in the right place, not just throwing stuff out there to get vegetation going. And we also monitor results. So we do a pre-planting survey, vegetation survey, very similar to what Christy was talking about. And then we can do that again later to compare our effect on the area. Yep. Mouse. Okay. This was briefly shown earlier at the ecoregions, and I just wanted to point out, you guys can see here, this is the lower Hudson Valley. We're really diverse in terms of the ecoregions. 4 different ecoregions. This is Rockland County in ecoregion 64. 58 goes through Eastern Orange, Putnam County, and Eastern Dutchess. 59 includes a sliver up the Hudson River Valley, as well as the coastal area in Westchester. And then Western Orange and Ulster have ecoregion 67. So we're a really diverse mix. And I just wanted to point that out because Wildwoods Restoration Project, our goal is to cover that whole area, to cover those different ecoregions, and to keep the provenance of the plants that we select.
Linda, can you go back to that for a second? Because I had this question.
This is a little bit closer in. Do you want to see?
Where to go? Because maybe Ethan will answer this, but can you explain this? I don't get that. What is that? What's going on here? Because when I looked before, I don't understand. Can you explain that?
No. Well, what's even worse, look at Adirondacks. It's
Yeah.
the same as the Hudson Highlands
Yeah.
and the New Jersey Highlands. Okay,
I mean,
so these are really physiographic provenances that are based on the geography and the nutrients in the soil that controls what the vegetation communities are. It says nothing about climate or the, what can survive in those conditions. So what we do, I didn't mean to talk about this today, but there's a whole area of research now of how far can you move a seed? It's called seed transfer zones. And what we believe, and our guideline that we're using is we need to overlay the USDA hardiness zones on top of these ecoregions so that basically our hardiness zone constrains where we move the seed within that ecoregion. So we're keeping within the Hudson Valley because that's the same hardiness zone. But then you may say climate change, well, maybe we should be getting some seeds from further south within the same ecoregion and bringing them up a little bit. So that's maybe for a future to start thinking about that, maybe just nearby further south. Those are whole areas of research. Anybody looking for graduate projects? Those areas are ripe for being researched right now. And then there's the whole issue of how seeds are moved. Like if it's spread by birds, the birds fly all over there. Like why would you have to keep it in the same ecoregion? If it's spread by ants, well, you may even need to keep it in the same park. But do you? I mean, is it better to move it around, get more diversity? Big areas of research. Okay, so here's a little bit closer look of the area, and the white stars are where our partners are currently located within this region. So we're working primarily in ecoregion 58 right now. We're developing a lot of seed collections, doing seed increase in ecoregion 58. We are also working with a couple partners in Westchester, and I'm not sure, oh yeah, okay. The Bergen County is also showing in there. So those are the areas we're working. We're just starting to establish our collections in 64. And we are working very closely with Hilltop Hanover for 59 seed and plants. So we exchange and do that there. So we're not duplicating efforts. So it was briefly mentioned, I think by Jess, the Northeast Seed Network. The Northeast Seed Network is an incipient organization. It just started a couple of years ago, led by the Native Plant Trust up in Massachusetts and the Ecological Health Network. And they have now hired a coordinator, and they have developed a seed storage location at Garnet Woods or Nasami Farms. I'm not sure which facility. And the idea is to bring everybody together that's working on local ecotype seeds. And in the Northeast, regardless of ecoregion, if it's in the Northeast, it's covered by this umbrella. And so I am participating in the Northeast Seed Network in the leadership. I'm a steering committee member of that network. And we're also participating in the Local 59 network, which is considered sort of a regional hub of the Northeast Seed Network. So imagine a big umbrella and different regional hubs gathering different groups, similar to the way the PRISM network works, where you've got different prisms that cover different regions of New York. They're trying to develop these hubs across different regions in the Northeast that are dealing with local ecotype seeds and plants and trying to increase the availability of it. So I would encourage you to get plugged into that if you'd like to. So Wildwoods Restoration Project is making plants available from ecotype seeds. And we're working as volunteers, so we're small right now. I see the scale of this operation and I drool, but it's all volunteer. So we're also collecting local ecotype seeds and trying to increase those the seed volumes. We're focusing on forest understory. Okay, we do have some other plants and some other seeds, but our main focus is forest understories. That's where we think the most need is. That's where a lot of the nurseries are not growing a lot of the plants. They're not showy. They may not be commercially viable because it takes 2 years to even germinate. And then you've got to spend 2 more years before you get a plant like this. So we're working on those species that are things that are hard to find. So our plants also have provenance. We track where we collect the seed, and the tag that goes on the plants continues to have that information. So we always know where that plant originally came from, what the seed it was that it originally came from. So if you're doing a project and you want, very specific local ecotype, we can see that and know that. We also do responsible seed collection. Lindsay talked about this outside, or somebody talked about this. 20% of the available seed that's based on the Bureau of Land Management's Seeds of Success program. And that was designed to make sure that you're not impacting the existing native population. So we do collect from wild populations, but we also do establish founder plots and collect seed from those. We want to ensure we have genetic diversity. So we try to get different populations. We try to collect from different individuals within the same population. Early ripening seed, mid ripening seed, late ripening seed. It's all things to keep in mind when you're trying to collect for genetic diversity. So our volunteers are involved in the collection. We have training that they have to go through before they do the collection. And they're also involved in sowing seeds. And we occasionally have workshops where they do that. We do also need more locations where we can collect seeds, especially if you can think about your forests and how little there is in the forest. It's very hard to find good populations there's enough plants, it's healthy enough that we can collect seed from. So we are always on the lookout for areas that are good, that we could get permission to collect seed from. We do get permission from every place we collect. We also have volunteers pot up seedlings. So we go to the park partners location and their local volunteers are involved in potting up the seedlings. And then one thing that we do that's unique is our volunteers take plants home to grow them at home then for the summer. They care for those plants. Some refer it as babysitting the plants, but they get attached to the plants then. They care about their success. They've got, their babies that they're bringing back, and they want to see those plants succeed. And that's one of the ways that we try to build that passion for continuing the stewardship and for caring about what happens in the restoration site. Volunteers also earn credit for plants when they grow plants for us. So they earn a 20% credit that they can then shop with among the plants that we've grown. And so they get something out of it as well. So we also grow plants specifically for that. Even though we're focused on forest understory, we know some of our volunteers might have shade, sun, they might have wet areas. So we grow plants that they can choose from for that. And then our volunteers are involved in planting and the restoration projects. So that's one of the areas that we're trying to build up. We are able to get about 500 plants in the ground in a single workday. We want to have more of that, more volunteers working. And so we also do plant rescues. This is relevant to anybody that's a land manager out there. If you know that you're going to be doing some work or some work is going to be done in a nice area that has some good natives, you can let us know. We'll come do a plant rescue, pot it all up, and find good homes for those plants. This happened last year. Scenic Hudson was going to be expanding a parking lot at one of their preserves. They called us. We had an emergency plant rescue. Over Memorial Day weekend, we got, I think, 3,000 something plants, including trilliums and bloodroots and Dutchman's breeches and, spice bush seedlings and all kinds of things, Christmas ferns, and all of those things that we're finding homes in restoration sites at other parks. So we've had 4 rescues. We've done 4,000 rescued over 4,000 plants. We have a potential plant rescue coming up in Orange County. Can I talk about this? Where's Ed?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, okay to talk about it. Okay. We have a potential plant rescue coming up in Harriman State Park, either this fall or next spring. If anybody would be interested in helping out with that, I'd love to have additional help. So we have not scheduled a date. So if you're interested in helping out with that, let me know. We can try to figure out a mutually convenient date. Okay. We also have some new workshops that we're offering. We're doing this over the winter, basically November, February, March, and April for fern spore sowing. So a lot of people don't think about this when you're doing genetically diverse plants and you're collecting seeds and you want to grow from seeds. Well, what about ferns? Most ferns that you buy in nurseries are either done from tissue culture or division. Not much genetic diversity, and certainly not probably local ecotype. And so we are growing ferns from spores, and we're teaching people how to do that as well. We have many volunteers now. There's probably about 40 volunteers that are growing ferns from spores now. So we offer these workshops. We'd be happy to, if your organization would be interested in hosting one, we do charge for them because it's a really specialized skill, and it's also a way for us to get some income, which, as you know, is important for nonprofits. So we have one coming up. It's going to be at Vassar, first Saturday in November. We held a couple here last year and over at CCE Rockland. And I'm looking for February, March, and April scheduling. Just one in each of those months. So successfully growing ferns. These are from some of our volunteers. So the first stage, the second stage, third stage. All right, and our 2024 projects. So I just will touch on what some of these things are. Black Rock Forest, we just have a couple of spots. There's some more of a demonstration, visibility restoration at a lesser used entrance that they wanted to show that, you know, things were going on there. It was a little bit more invaded there than the rest of the park. They started doing some invasives removal, and we came in to do some plantings. They also had a unexpected impact there this year. The road is under conservation easement to the utilities, and they did some work on the road, and I'm not sure exactly what they did, but the whole hillside next to the road ended up bare earth and rock. And so we said, okay, well, that's why we do, that's why we formed Wildwoods Restoration Project. And in fact, we had been collecting seed from a lot of plants along that hillside, and we had plants that could go right back in there. So we had a planting day earlier this month and planted, I think it was 300 something plants on that hillside with picks. We had to pick through, use picks to get home. So I'm not sure what we're going to do about that. It's like concrete. Not sure what they did. But so that's one challenge we have. Granite Mountain, we're working with Granite Mountain they're removing barberry. So we went up the hill to where the barberry sort of faded out and the native forest started taking over and started removing barberry down. And we started doing the plantings. So they did the removals. We're doing the plantings. We're working down the hill towards the entrance. And Pound Ridge Land Conservancy, Armstrong Preserve put up a deer disclosure. We did a planting there last fall, went back, did another planting this past weekend. The area is really looking like it's developing an understory now. Very drastic difference between inside the deer disclosure and outside. There's like Carex pennsylvanica and Christmas fern outside, and there's a big diversity inside, and it's this tall. So I think we're going to have really nice success there. And then farm stock, this is a really interesting project. Some of you know about it. There's an area in Farnstock State Park that has New England cottontail, which is special concern rabbit, and it's covered with barberry. And that's not good for the rabbits, although they use it as cover. So you don't want to like wholesale remove all the barberry and then they don't have any cover. So what they've done is remove barberry in specific patches, whether it's 10 by 10 meter by 10 meter.
2 acres.
Point
10.
10 by 10 meters, and put up a deer disclosure around each of those patches. I believe there was some study work that was done there in the past. So last year we did plantings, and now what we're trying to do is redevelop the understory there within the deer disclosures, get that established, and then have a whole sequence of patches in different levels of development. And once some of those patches become established, we can open it back up to the rabbits and then study how they use those areas. And hopefully if it's successful, we can do more and more and more and more, and gradually get that area turned over to more of a native habitat while not impacting the rabbits and still letting them have the cover of the barberry. So very tricky situation. Old Croton Aqueduct, some of you have been involved in the ongoing I Love My Parks Day effort over 12 years now to remove invasives along the stretch of Old Croton Aqueduct in Ossining and Croton on Hudson. And we've partnered to put some native plants back in those areas that are now shifting to native habitats along those areas. All right. The last two in New Jersey are new, so those will be interesting. And I just want to talk a little bit. This year, we produced 18,000 plants. This year, okay, we did more last year. We have some left over. More than 200 different species. We maxed out our space. We had 50 volunteers growing plants. They love to grow plants. They're very successful. And we were able to, reward our volunteers with like 450 plants. About 5,000 of these plants are targeted to go into restoration sites, and we think we can get them in. That leaves us with a lot left over. And so as some of you saw on the list, earlier this year, I sent out, an availability list. We got a lot of excess plants. So about 1,800 went to PRISM Partners for their preserves. So we're in need of help with planting. We need to ramp up our planting efforts. We could get more in the ground if we had more people signing up for plantings. So if anyone's willing to help with that, or if you'd like to cross-advertise the events, that would be great. We have events coming up with Hudson Highlands Land Trust at Granite Mountain, and another one at Pound Ridge Land Conservancy. So those are on our website. Excess plant availability. We do expect to have excess plants available again next year. We don't want to be a nursery. We don't want to have a commercial nursery and sell plants all the time. But when we do have excess, we want to make it available to you guys, and at a very low price. We don't want it to be a barrier, because these plants were grown by volunteers, volunteering to make them part of a restoration project. So these are some of the species we expect to have next year, because that's dependent on weather and the mice. But yeah, we expect to have these things available next year as excess. More information, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, keep in track of what we're doing on our website. This is a link as well. See upcoming events on our website, read about what we do, follow us on social media. And I think my information was on the first slide, but it's linda@wildwoodsproject.org if you want to contact me. Also, everyone asked me about the t-shirt. It is a pretty t-shirt, and we did bring some with us today. Natalie, wave your hand, Natalie. She has them with her. So if anybody would like one, we just asked for a donation to help cover our costs. Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
All right, we have two more presentations, and then we'll have a lunch period for questions while I'm getting, I think Ethan's next, right? So while I get Ethan set up, does anyone have any quick questions for Linda? And then we can address the rest of the questions at the end that are like around lunchtime.
Where are you based? We don't have an office, but it's my house.
You said you run out of space.
Yeah. I have a 13 acres of woods, and that's where our camping spots are, and that's where our growing area is. So.
Oh, I just wanted to say, just yesterday, I saw that Linda, there's an article about your project in Audubon magazine.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're in Audubon magazine.
Oh, good for you. That's awesome. Cool plug there. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Ethan, and learn about what they're doing up at Vassar.
Hey. My name's Ethan. I'm a Vassar College graduate from the class of 2022. I'm back now on a post-bac fellowship, and today I'm going to be chatting a bit about our kind of newly formed native plant propagation program. So to kind of acquaint you with the site, Preserve at Vassar College's Preserve, we're up in Poughkeepsie, New York. It's 527 acres of land that's directly adjacent to Vassar College and also Vassar Arboretum. There are multiple stakeholders on the land. So we have the environmental cooperative, which is over here, and then the Collins Field Station. And the environmental cooperative is more the outreach education branch of the preserve. So we'll host education programming through there. We also run field trips for second graders in the city of Poughkeepsie. And then we have the Collins Field Station, which is more of the outreach, or not outreach, research and fieldwork management sort of branch of the preserve. There's also the Poughkeepsie Farm Project on the land. Vassar Athletics will host events on the land, rugby fields. There's a community garden as well. So different people involved, but they'll talk to you about the cooperative and the field station. So 527 acres of land, 415 of those acres are designated specifically as an ecological preserve, and those other remaining 115 or so acres are multi-use space. The mission of the preserve is to protect the ecological diversity of the land and educational value of the space. So our native plant propagation program is pretty new. We've always kind of had plant propagation and seed collection ongoing, but it's more so taking a trot in the woods. I see an acorn, pop in a bucket, what's going to happen sort of thing. And so we also did have an emphasis on seed amplification, but it was pretty small scale. And we kind of thought, you know, we do a lot of restoration work on the preserve. Oftentimes we get these trees or plants from Trees for Tribs. They're great, but the preserve has a history of agricultural land use. It's been deforested as much of Dutchess County has been. And so you can't guarantee that a tree growing up in a nursery in Saratoga is going to thrive on this kind of impounded site. And so we had that like, oh my gosh, we have seeds. Maybe we should collect them. And so that's kind of the rabbit hole that I fell down. And we formally established the Native Plant Propagation Program in 2023 as a partnership between the outreach education branch of the preserve and more research fieldwork side of it as well. So our kind of overarching goals of our program are to create a stock of site-adapted native plants, because native is great, local is better. And so we work a lot with seed amplification and dissemination. And with that, I mean, collect the seed, grow it up in these kind of foundation plots that we saw similar to earlier today, and then we'll disseminate the seed back out into the community. We want to preserve local genetics, specifically in a changing climate. There's also the lens of preservation of iconic trees. We have this open grown white oak. It's visible on our aerial imagery. It's like our statement tree. And it's going to die, as all things will. And so, you know, we noticed on its way out, let's try and get some acorns from it. We call her our mother oak. And so kind of preserving those historically relevant trees. We'll also engage in seed-based outreach and seed literacy education, because Vassar is a college, we can engage the students directly in this work. So seed collection on the preserve. We have various uses and applications, which I'll talk a bit more about. Everything is done manually. We like are in the woods, like hunched over like little gremlins, picking up acorns. It's a sight to see. Collections can be opportunistic. Oftentimes they are, but we kind of have some efforts going forth to make this less so and a bit more intentional. So we put together a seed collection calendar, which essentially it's like a Google sheet, but it comprises our own observations as well as National Phenology Network data, so that we can go and say, oh, it's June, what should I be looking for? And it makes it a bit more intentional. It's easier to plan out a season as well, because in the summer I was like, oh my God, it's field season. And now it's October and I'm like, no, it's field season. And so we also have a target taxa list, and this is kind of a guiding list for our species for what do we want to collect from? What do we want to grow on the preserve? And that's influenced by a kind of variety of variables or characteristics, but most importantly, or most predominantly, historic populations on the preserve, so maybe things that we've lost due to anthropogenic pressures, whether that be deer or disturbance, vines, you name it, we got it. Or also thinking about climate change. Climate is changing, news. And so we saw the USDA hardiness zone shift last year. We're aware that ranges are shifting north. How can we be a bit preemptive in that and kind of plan for what's going to thrive on the site in 20 years when it's a proper tree, and make sure that we're kind of timing ourselves correctly in this kind of change. And then our seeds are also given a use code. So that helps make it a lot more intentional, because you're not walking around, you're collecting something and you're like, huh, now I have a plant, what am I going to do with this? It ends up looking like a weird acronym, which you'll see in a sec, but I'll talk about that more. And then our data is collected manually as well as digitally using ArcGIS field maps.
calendar shareable? Like,
It can be, and it will be.
awesome.
These are photos of a slide, but it's linked and I will get it to you. So we have a lot of restoration projects. Formerly agricultural site, we have no shortage of needs. Canopy gaps, riparian areas, meadows. Meadow is like the buzzword of the year. I feel like it's the year of the meadow for restoration. And then also degraded sites. So this photo shows Eco Restore, which is a former dumping site on the preserve. It's been an ongoing restoration project for a few years now, collecting trees from here that are seeds from around the area that maybe people have predispositions of them being weedy. I'm thinking box elder, but it's gonna live. I'll take it over mugwort. And we also have our foundation plots. Those are herbaceous perennials, seed amplification, forbs and graminoids, that sort of thing. Woody restoration plots. These are holding plots for woodies that we'll collect that maybe need a bit more time to develop and grow before we feel comfortable planting them out. Pollinator gardens, both on the preserve and off the preserve on Vassar's main campus, as well as in the community. And then outreach. So we'll engage in seed swaps, plant giveaways, educational outreach, those sorts of things. So our guiding principles. We are a 500-acre preserve. So we have to think about when we see a population, we're never going to come across 10,000 individuals. That's just not the reality. And that kind of throws back to Bureau of Land Management Seeds of Success protocols. We follow them, but we adapt them to our specific needs. So it's like the third time you'll see this map today. Ecoregions, we're ecoregion 59, and I put 58-ish, where this cute little heart is. We are in what I like to call the armpit of 59, 58. We're fractured by the Hudson Highlands. And so most of our collections occur in the 59 Hudson River corridor, but we also do partner with some sites in 58 as well. Essentially, we go roughly plus or minus 25 miles from the preserve. We aim to collect wild or ecotypic seeds. It's a gray area. What denotes ecotypic? There could be a whole long conversation about this. And I bring it up because we are in proximity to the Vassar Arboretum. And arboretums are a lot of things. They're a place where a lot of invasive species get introduced. They're also a place where you have trees such as bur oak, which is a native tree to New York State. We don't really find it growing on the preserve. If the bur oak in the arboretum is, say, 60 years old now, it's been there for a while, is it then ecotypic? Has it kind of acclimatized, and genetically it may have come from somewhere else, but now it's part of the community. It's giving out acorns. A squirrel's going to take that acorn and run. Who am I to not do the same? And so we'll collect sparingly from these trees, but we will kind of incorporate it, and it's more species diversity. It gets it back into our system, and there are definitely nitty-gritty topics that are further in that, but yeah. We'll collect from healthy populations only, and we won't collect more than 20% of a substantial healthy population. And we won't collect from something that's newly planted or a cultivar. So going back to the Arboretum, I'm not going to collect from something that they planted last year, but when we know that it's been there for 50 years, it's here. And so our data collection, we collect a lot of data. Every seed that's collected is given a seed identification number, or a SID, and this follows the plant from seed to site. And by site, I mean planting site. So seed 001, it's a red oak. That will tell you where that seed was collected, when that seed was collected, who collected it, how much we collected, the health of that population, and a bunch of other characteristics. This is all input into a native seed collection log, which is a very robust Google sheet. And then it's also mapped on ArcGIS field maps so that we can kind of assess for any inherent bias on our own preserve. Are there areas that we're neglecting because we just don't like going there, or what's the reason? And so this is what our little collection log looks like. So we have date, seed ID, who collected it? That's me. Genus, species, common name. We do genus and species separate so that we can have account for genus diversity. I mentioned the use codes earlier. They do just look like weird acronyms like BRFP. That would be a collection for biodiversity restoration. It's a foundation plot species that we're considering. And then it's also pollinators. So pollinator plants are plants that will typically disseminate back out into the local community after we winter sow them and grow them up into plugs. And then growth type, collection type, quantity, those will get filled in. I just collected them a month ago, so that will happen. And then big collection location, if we mapped it, a storage location, we have a nice little basket that says "Clean Me" on it, and got a lot to sift through there. And then any notes that might be pertinent. And so this is a map of the preserve again. On our field map survey, we collect date, a photo of the population. If something weird was to come up in germinate, you can go back and say, no, okay, this was the right plant. Property owner / parcel name. So when we work on our partner sites, some of them have different parcel names. So we'll go about it with that. We also will differentiate a collection on the preserve versus a collection in the arboretum, just so that we can kind of afterwards geospatially represent that differently. Seed ID, genus name. Some of these are required the second you fill out the survey. Some of these aren't. I'm not like off the top of my head, I can tell you our next seed ID is going to be 304. But when I'm in the field, I can't always tell you that. So you can go in and enter that after the fact. Genus, species, again, I like to think I know what I'm doing, but sometimes the Latin names escape me. So you can enter that after the fact, but common name, use code, and the rest. And so this is what the map of the collections look like across the preserve. When I talk about like bias towards areas, like this is an area we didn't really collect from. It's a shrubland. I don't like walking through apple trees. I will this year though. And then you can also see like this area of the preserve is kind of infamously pretty invaded. So we don't go over here for native seed collections a lot because it is pretty much like canopy collapse area. And so we're able to assess for any inherent bias. And also like, this is the field station. Wow, I really love collecting here. Maybe I should go for a farther walk, and those sorts of things. But then the data exists as a pop-up on our map as well. And right now it's all stored in ArcGIS online, but idea is to have it accessible as a web map someday. And so our analytics. So since fall of 2023, this number, I input this on Monday, and of course it changed. So right now, I think we actually just hit 151 different species collected, and our genus diversity is 104, and we're just over 300 collections to date. And so we dabble in all areas. Vines, sparingly. They're the bane of everyone's existence. I am aware of that. Woody vines especially, but vines that we will collect are like coral, honeysuckle, and native vines to kind of try and get that native biodiversity back in. And they also work well for when we give plants back out to partners and it's like a Poughkeepsie school. And, you know, that plant's gonna look beautiful there. The fence outside the field station. So where does all of this take place? The fence outside the field station, aptly called that because it is the literal fence outside the field station. We call it the FOFS. It's the hub for our native plant propagation program. It's 0.8 acres of fenced in land and it's split up. So we have foundation plots, woody restoration plots, as well as professor researcher plots, as you can see here, aerial imagery. Yeah, so this is all in kind of preparation. Things are developing, more plants will get in. And so for our foundation plots, talked a bit about them already today, but essentially wild collected seed grown in cultivated single species rows or sections. We use these for seed amplification of native foraging graminoids. So any seed that we collect in here directly goes back out into the community. The seeds collected from both the preserve and partner sites because we're not trying to create a vast variety of anything. And come spring of 2025, we should have roughly 18 different species in here, which is awesome. Right now we have about 6. So a lot of work. But it was really cool. We started these all up this year. So this swamp milkweed, collected it last year, tell you the literal plant. And so it's been awesome to see these all kind of like come up and it gives a whole new use to the space. And so in addition to our foundation plots, we have our woody restoration plots holding our woody species and some ephemeral species as well. Really anything that isn't going to flower its first year or needs a bit more time to germinate. It's a holding space. We have these wooden frame beds. They're lined with hardware cloth because shrews and voles and mice, and I need like a resident hawk. But we also, yeah, this is just kind of our holding space for them. And we have a few more of these frames, and any seed that we collect will also be winter sowed out here as well. And we'll spend winter out here. Outreach. So this is kind of the side of the work that's facilitated by the environmental cooperative. So we will give donations of pollinator plants to local organizations and groups. This year specifically, I think we have something like 16 or so different organizations lined up. A lot of them are Poughkeepsie schools, Poughkeepsie Conservation Action Committee, other kind of municipal organizations, as well as our own partner sites. We will also incorporate seed and native plant materials into education programming. So this goes back to field trips that we host for City of Poughkeepsie schools. So this year we're talking about potentially going into schools and teaching little winter sewing and milk jugs and sending those back home with the kids, as well as winter sewing workshops for the general public, as well as with our own students, teaching seed literacy. I come from a background of invasive species management, and a lot of our invasive species come from the gardens. And so thinking about teaching them about these native seeds and then in turn the native plants and getting that back out into the community is like a really easy pathway for kind of impact. And then also engagement in regional and native seed networks, so Local 59 or Eco 59, the Northeast Seed Network as well. And we are also working on partnerships with local land trusts and land managers for seed collection efforts. These are some photos from our potting update this past Saturday. It was awesome. We ran through 240 pounds of dirt and got a lot of things potted up for the winter to make space for winter sowing in like a few months. And the future of our program, more plants, that'd be great. Increased local and regional seed engagement. So that's both with education and other partners. Also talking about Vassar as a convening place for folks in the Northern Hudson region, because as I've mentioned, Hudson Highlands kind of splits us. And so there are folks a bit north that are starting to work on this a bit more as well. And so acting as a convening place for us. Potentially something on December 4th, not really potentially, it's gonna happen. You'll hear information. And exploring the role that Vassar can play in supporting seed literacy in academia. So we are in a really unique position because we are a college and we have access to the students and we can teach them all about this directly. And then we also have those community ties. So I see us as a little kind of like pocket that can disseminate out into Poughkeepsie. But maybe Bard can do the same up in Annandale on the Hudson, and Yukon can do the same in Storrs. And then you have all these little kind of mini hubs of these colleges and universities that have this land and have the ability to do this and engage with the community in a meaningful way. And how can we kind of help in facilitating that? Thanks to our partner organizations. And then if you want to get involved, if you want plants, if you want to be a partner site, if you want to learn more, anything, there's a little QR code. Yeah.
That was great. There's going to be questions. And one of the things I want to suggest to the group and also to the presenters is that these are really a lot of innovative, really cool stuff that people are doing. And it could be on this topic or a variety of topics. And I love when our partnership advertises things like, hey, if you want to come shadow me in this process that I'm doing for a day, to advertise that. For example, like North Salem Open Land Foundation just did a deer fencing demonstration, right? How do you make a deer fence? That sort of thing, and then opened it up. So like I'd encourage everyone here, if you're doing some kind of cool technique that you think the partners might want to learn, say, hey, I'm doing it on this day. People want to come like see or shadow. That's how we can all learn and feel a little bit more confident to do it on our own land. So not putting you on the spot, but like that's a lot of really neat new stuff you're doing. So like, if you ever want to learn that process, like reach out to the partnership, like contact me and I can get you in touch with the right people to see like, I really want to learn how to do this, feeling a little intimidated, a lot of information in the presentation. I just want to like shadow and like learn the process of like reporting and that sort of thing. It's a great way that the partnership can help you with that. So just putting a plug out there for that. All right, cool. All right, last presentation. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions, lunch, plant sales coming up. Adam, we good to go on that? And like, so last presentation is about 20 minutes, and then we'll can do that. Let's see, what else do I got? I think that's it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so another plug before we go to the Arc Restoration Project is that I had the opportunity to visit one of their sites. I got to, did we do the wrong one?
I'm just making sure it's on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had the opportunity to visit one of the sites that you'll be hearing about in a second here. And I love visiting each of the different partnerships, reserves, etc. So if you are interested in Christy and I coming out, Chrissy usually has some basically video. It's really good promotion for your own organization. We can put it on social, put it in our newsletter, and really highlight the great work that you're doing. Please reach out to us because we love visiting the sites because we learn a ton. And it's just good exposure for your organization as well to kind of like communicate the storytelling behind what it is that you're doing. So it was an awesome visit to these sites that they're going to talk about here. And I really got to learn a lot of the unique challenges that they face, you know, in a more of an urban setting. But doing a lot of the work that we do, we've learned about in other preserves in other areas. So we'll turn it over to Chris and Ryan.
Thanks, man. I'm Chris. This is Ryan from the New York Restoration Project. So just a brief overview of the company, because we do cover a lot of ground. We're a nonprofit. We were founded in 1995 by Bette Midler. Basically, just picking up trash. She was just driving around and saw how trashed a lot of our parkland was. So she gathered up a few people and started just kind of cleaning up those parklands, and it really kind of spiraled from there. Since then, we started buying up vacant parking lots from the early 90s, going into the 2000s, and turned them into community gardens. So we now own 52 of those. And additionally, people can apply for grants within the city, and then we'll come out and build a new garden on either a school or, you know, a parking lot or some kind of land. So since that program has been running, we've just completed 350. We assisted with the Million Trees Initiative in New York City. We maintain over 80 acres of parkland in northern Manhattan. We conduct over 150 garden workshops annually, and we also distribute trees throughout the 5 boroughs. And last year we did 3,500 native trees and shrubs ranging over 30 species. So Ryan and I both work in Highbridge. Highbridge Park is where we spend most of our time. It's located between 155th and 200th Street in northern Manhattan. NYRP stewards the northern section of the forest from 181st to 200th Street, which is roughly 53 acres of the forest. This area, if you're not familiar, is super densely populated. It's very underserved. You know, neglect in every way imaginable within the park and the area. So we have a lot of challenges that we face here. Before we get into it, I just want to thank Christy and the NRG team for kind of, you know, writing the framework for what we do in our park here and everything else throughout the city, because, you know, we really appreciate it, and we've taken a lot of your guidance with our plantings and our sites year after year. So urban ecological restoration for NYRP, how do we go about this? Low intensity, low impact, consistent invasive removal. So we're out there 7 days a week. We work 10 hours a day, and a majority of the time we're out there hands and knees, you know, clipping things. We work on pretty steep hills, and we don't use chemicals, so everything is done by hand by us out there. So we really get to know the land out there. We don't use any heavy machinery as well. And typically after invasive removal, we do concurrent introduction of native species during those invasive management. So whether we're doing a large scale tree planting, you know, a few thousand trees, or just administering grass seed, we're trying to take up that valuable room underneath the soil there, so the invasives don't come back. We want to increase plant and wildlife diversity. Since we are in the city in a very densely you know, populated area, there's tons and tons of recreational activities within the park. So we need to make the park accessible to everybody. So we have a mountain bike course, we have baseball fields, basketball courts, there's a swimming pool within the park. So it's very widely used for a lot of different reasons. Community involvement is also very important to us. The more volunteers we can get in there, obviously the better for us to help. And it's also kind of another set of eyes to help any of the negative things that may be happening, or, you know, spotting different weeds, or just kind of spurring the curiosity of the community. So it's really important to us. And then the trash removal, which Christy also touched on, there's just tons and tons of trash that come through the park. So we're out there for, you know, anywhere from an hour or 2, 3, 4 every day, just picking up the trash to make it accessible for everybody, or just cleaning up after decades and decades of pretty heavy dumping, construction dumping and car parts and whatnot. So native canopy restoration is our primary goal out there. Where we do have canopy, it is almost exclusively Norway, sycamore maple, and black locust. And then we have large sections of the park that are not. We've taken a lot of storm damage over the years, and then we end up with these huge canopy gaps like you see here. So for us, that's immediate. If we have a huge tree that falls down or another gap, we need to go in there and close that, as quickly as possible. So this is where we'll come in and do our invasive management. Typically in the wintertime, we'll take care of it if feasible. And then we'll be doing plantings in the fall or springtime. So we have, planting seasons kind of coming upon us now. So doing some pretty large scale sites. So we actively manage these sites year after year as well. So when we plant these trees or shrubs, we're consistently going in there, for a new site, anywhere from 5, 6, 7 times 80, a year, and just cutting back as many of the invasives as possible. We want to give these trees as much, much space as they can to grow here. This is the site we did back in like 2016. It was about 3 acres or so, just straight porcelain berry and Japanese knotweed. Most of the small saplings you see there were American chestnut hybrids that we planted in with some pine trees and some oaks, and been doing a lot of research on them. And I'm happy to say the photo on the right there we took on Monday. Our chestnuts are starting to fruit, so be excited about that. We also deal with very steep hills in this park. Almost every site that we're working on is a pretty steep hill. So over the last few years, we've been kind of brainstorming on how to deal with the erosion issues, because we get hit with it. Almost every storm we have, you can see the soil and sediment just washing down. So we started doing what we call cribbing. Basically, it's taking any of the storm damaged trees or trees, invasive trees that we remove, and structuring them in terrace form to help build up the soil. And then we take smaller branches and bundle them up, typically with like porcelain berry vine or grapevine, and then stack them on top. And within a few weeks, you can really see the soil, just building right back up. So it's been a huge help for us. I think visually it looks really nice, and it also helps us maneuver throughout these sites. Anybody who's worked on steep hills, it gets really tricky, and you cause a lot of erosion yourself just walking up and down. So rather than having ropes set up all across this, we'll be able to navigate through them. Some of these sites we're also building the really steep ones. I have a picture, little staircases as well. So High Bridge is kind of historically known, invasive wise, tons and tons of porcelain berry, Japanese knotweed, and bittersweet, but 3 that dominate the most there. So just in 2023 alone, we removed roughly 100,000 pounds of invasive management. So it's a rough estimate. We try to calculate daily what we take out of there, but it's a very large amount, especially without being able to pull and without using chemicals there. It's constantly coming back. So we're just constantly cutting out there. We want to control our woody invasive plants, probably the most important thing for us invasive wise. Suppressing our vine use without the herbicides. We're just, like I said, constantly cutting and cutting and cutting, and with the slopes, we're not able to pull. So that's most of it is composted on site. So we leave it, we'll cut it there and just leave it on site when possible. Certain things, if they're flowering and going to seed, we remove it, typically in trash bags or just large leaf bags. You just kind of have to haul it out of there. So it depends kind of on the time of year.
How often do you have to cut it to find that it kind of gives up, or is that not?
Gives up, yeah. Like eradication isn't necessarily our goal out there. I've been there for coming on 10 years now, and there's spots where we're highly invaded with Japanese knotweed and porcelain berry. And it gets less and less every year. So if I was going into that site maybe 8 times a year, I'm going in like once or twice now. So it's fading away, but it takes a really long time for it to go away. We do, if we notice, a newer species coming in and we notice it, then we will target that specific species and try to eradicate it. So we had Italian arum come in about 2 years ago. We had a tiny little patch, and we're down to just a few plants that are coming up this year. Yes.
Sorry.
Mhm.
So you cut coffee
We cut knotweed. A lot of it is by hand on our hills. Weed whacking we found is the most useful, and I think somebody gave a presentation math prism meeting that I really enjoyed that because the knotweed and the constant cutting with the head trimmer is what we found has worked really well. Very, very constantly. Most of our park is covered in knotweed, especially throughout our planting sites. We'll go in there, 5-6 times a year, if not more. So our goal is to get to it before it flowers. Once it starts flowering, then it's too late. We have to cut it and remove it out of there. So weed whacking, if you can hit it when it's low, you can just keep kind of zipping through those sites.
I featured knotweed at the last meeting, so I can share with you those presentations. There was like 3 or 4 presentations on it.
Yeah, they were
variety
great.
of different techniques. Yeah, I know. It's not. There's no silver bullet, but it depends on the resources you have and timing.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I mentioned earlier, if you're on certain sites and with our planting sites, we're able to, you keep cutting and then we're administering some native grass seed and wildflower mixtures with it. So it kind of takes up all that extra room. Yes.
Is there a specific reason you're not?
It's been a company policy for as long as I've been there. So, I'll leave it out. So I mentioned before, volunteers are a massive part of our company in general. So in 2023, we hosted just over 2,600 community and corporate volunteers. This is within our 80 acres of parkland, so the 53 of Highbridge, and then the other 2 parks that we maintain. Still a really large amount of volunteers for us to handle. They do a lot of the kind of brunt work. We have them doing, like I said, that you can see them on a fairly steep hill here. We have them doing everything from, trash removal. Yeah, they've removed about 3,000 pounds of trash last year, and over 24,000 pounds of invasive vegetation. So we have them doing almost everything we'd be doing on a daily basis. They don't use power tools, but everything else, they're on there with the hills with us. They're picking up tons of trash. They're cutting. They've been helping us with the erosion control issues. So a little bit of everything. So it's been a huge impact for us. And so the low impact community driven management is just kind of huge philosophy, and it's something we rely on almost every year. We're planting about 600 trees this year on a pretty steep hillside. So with our small team of there's 3 of us who are out there full time, that would take us probably a month or so to accomplish. So with the volunteers, we're gonna hopefully knock it out within maybe 2 or 3 events. Some of the hurdles we face out there. Christy mentioned this earlier. We still in 2024, we still deal with tons and tons of illegal dumping. The one on the left is from like a decade ago. That's Highbridge used to be known as just like an illegal. It'd be a place where people just dump their cars. They'd just drive them over the cliffs, and the cars would just burn up, and they would take the insurance money. But we're still, every time we dig out there, we're still finding engines and fenders and things like that from back in the day. We found a taxi cab a few years ago that we dated back. It was one of the blue cabs. I think it was 10 cents per mile. So we dated it back to, I think, like 1980, somewhere in there. So it was just one of those parks that went under, just huge neglect. And then we also deal with just tons and tons of like household dumping and encampments. So the one on the right-hand side there was something from maybe like 2 years ago. Something like that, really damages the forest floor there. And then I think we have to take extreme precaution when we're going into these areas because you don't know what's in there. So everything we have to go through with a picker, sometimes tongs, and piece by piece put this into trash bags. So something like that, I think took maybe 6 or 7 people, most of a full day, most of an 8 to 10 hour shift, just to do this one little section here. So it's something we deal with on a daily basis. We spend about an hour to 4 hours removing litter. Summertime, you get heavier involvement out there, so it's a lot of just the day-to-day trash, and then you get one of these every week or every 2 weeks. So it really kind of stalls your work. We just want to get out there and plant trees and cut invasive things, and then when you see something like that, you have to take immediate action. It's out there.
How are you measuring the tonnage?
We do per trash bag, so it's a rough estimate. We have like big black, like 50-gallon trash bags. We fill them up, give or take about 15 pounds each. Some of the larger stuff, when you're pulling tires and car parts and things out, you just have to use a really rough estimate. It's the best way that we can do that. But we're not actually, occasionally when we scrap our metal, the truck will go onto a scale so we can actually see how much we pulled out. But, just certain sites like this, it's how many trash bags you have and just kind of dividing up the math. So we also deal with a large, homeless population and encampment areas within our park. Been there for almost 10 years, and almost every year we've had 3, 4, sometimes like 10 to 15 people living out there in the same spot. Sometimes, much more than that. These are, huge public safety issues. Typically, they have campfires out there. We see a fair amount of overdoses out there. It creates a ton of trash, and said you could just see right where their kind of living section is. The entire forest floor there is kind of raked out, and nothing's there. And this is from I want to say about 2019, and there's still nothing growing in that section, and that was removed, afterward. This is in High Bridge Park. This is all still in High Bridge. It does happen. Yeah, I think, it does unfortunately happen. It's the area we work in. I think a lot of New York City in general is pretty bad with opioids right now. So it's something we deal with pretty heavily out there. The next slide, we do, unfortunately, I think it's something that we deal with on a daily basis. And, it's one of the hardest parts, I think, of my job and Brian's job and anybody else who works out there. And especially when we are bringing such a vast amount of volunteers into the park, and we're finding, roughly 1,000 per month. And that's not even us. That's just really like on the pathways and like certain areas there. That's not even us like really digging in deep to the park. So we don't even have to really search too far to find this. And so trying to do public programming and bring volunteers in there, and obviously for our safety, it's really difficult to navigate through this. It's one extra thing, and then in the summer you add all the vegetation on top of that, and people just throwing needles and anything else into the park makes it really tricky to navigate working in some of these areas. I mentioned before, but we do have very steep slopes there, so they create a lot of tripping hazards out there. I know I've fallen many a time, especially in the porcelain where it gets on top of it. We are not, we can't pull any of the invasives due to the erosion, so it's just constant like hands and knees and cutting. Which if you're weed whacking or hedge trimming gets pretty tricky and potentially hazardous. The last 2 years, one of the guys on our team who's not here today has been installing staircases through a lot of our really steep sites, and they've been holding up really well, and it's making the access to these sites a lot more manageable. So a site that I would look at and maybe see us only doing 1 or 2 times a year because of how difficult it is, this is allowing us to go in there much more often with a lot more ease, and potentially bringing volunteers onto a site that's a lot steeper. It makes it a lot safer for us.
Sites that you go back to, if you find a certain amount of regeneration of things that you want.
Sure. Yes. We do have a fair amount of native regeneration. It's oak, hickory, chestnut forest, and we do have a lot of bitternut hickories that are regenerating, which is great. So I think one of the benefits of us doing a lot of like the hands and knees work is we can find these little saplings and seedlings coming through. So we do our best to protect them at all costs. I think that to us is more important than anything else, if they can just naturally regenerate.
There's some native like understory regeneration too, like early successional species like sunflowers and primroses and stuff coming up. I have a question about no cutting, no pulling on steep slopes, only cutting. Do you do that year after year until those are dead? And
It's
how long
yeah.
do those roots after that plant is dead keep holding that slope?
We're doing it, week after week, month after month, really. How you said how long are the vines like holding the slope up for?
Yeah, I mean after you've killed that plant by cutting it, how long are those roots do they continue to hold the slope, or do you do restoration after?
We typically do restoration, so that the grass seed, as well as just like taking up some of that valuable soil there, it helps stabilize the ground, and then we're also concurrently planting, our native trees and shrubs with it, so it kind of helps all the build up of the soil. And then when you add in the Caribbean aspect of it, it all kind of helps with that. But yeah, pulling out a porcelain berry vine that's been there for 20 years can do a ton of damage to a slope. So it's something we really try to avoid. Tours?
Like of your restoration?
We do, yeah. I did one with Brent and Christy a little while ago. It's usually just like I just kind of tell people to contact us to do it. It's typically not like a public thing. We have occasionally done partnering with NRG or the NAC, doing like salamander walks or some kind of like fungus walk that we'll do. If you go to our website of myrp.org, you can see like any of the public events we do. I run forestry workshops on Sundays, spring, summer, and fall. So if you want to get out and like physically do some of this work with us, there's that as well.
I'm telling you, it was like so eye-opening for me and Christy to go, and we did a little mini doc on it, but you see all the challenges that are faced in different settings, right? And just sharing those experiences and how to learn. I highly recommend just like reaching out to partners and being like, we'd love to come check things out, and learn through experience and what other people here are doing.
Yeah, I'm always happy to give a tour and just kind of show our work. I take a lot of pride in it as a company, and maybe we could set up some kind of prison smaller walk.
On October 26th, I think it's City of Forest Day this year, and I'm giving a tour also on that.
Yeah.
And Chris, just in the interest of time, we just kind of hold questions just because I know that Hilltop's doing sales soon, so we'll just hold questions to the end during the lunchtime.
Okay. So my last slide here. We don't thankfully have to deal with deer. I live in Westchester, so I know how bad the deer, can be out here. I've worked on projects in Staten Island at a fresh kill to just kind of see how quickly deer can damage everything. But we do have groundhogs. Groundhogs do a decent amount of damage to our newly planted trees. They nibble at the bark. They can kill a whole acre of trees in a couple of weeks if they wanted to. And I think for me, the tripping hazards as somebody who's been on the receiving end of falling into a groundhog hole, it's terrible and you can really mess your legs up there. So, there are deer out there. I love them, but they do a lot of damage.
How do you manage them?
The groundhogs? We let them be. I mean, we're not going to try to get rid of them.
All right. Hi, I'm Ryan. I'll try to hurry. This is probably going to be like a slightly nerdier and less depressing part of the talk. So hopefully that's what you want to see. It's going to be more like nitty gritty of our forest restoration process. So Christy already went over some of this stuff. And I think we start when we talk to volunteers about like the benefits of forest restoration, so they know the reason that we're doing what we're doing. So I figured I'd start with that with you guys as well. It might be review, but I think a lot of forest restoration or any ecological restoration is supporting native biodiversity as one of the main goals. But it's like especially important in New York City because we have such fragmented habitats, although I think there is more than we would imagine, like actually connectivity between them. I just put this picture of the northern dusky salamander up here because that's a regionally not that rare species, but it's very rare in New York City, and we actually have it in Highbridge Park. So there are these cool little pockets of habitats that we can support with forest restoration. Another big one for urban areas is that trees are really good at cooling air temperature. And so if we can put more trees in the park, that will actually cool the air temperature. New York City has the strongest urban heat island effect of any city in the country. So it's really important for us to do that. We also have a lot of flooding issues in New York. We have a lot of asphalt. We have a combined sewer overflow system. That means when our storm drains flood, it flushes sewage into our waterways. So having a native forest in our park to absorb water that would otherwise go in the Harlem River, very important. And I think a lot of people have talked about the connecting people with nature thing in New York. I mean, I think this is for me, like what I find really valuable is like moving there from outside of the city and seeing how much more important it is for me and for a lot of people to have green spaces. So when we're like looking at our sites that we want to target for planting, like Chris said, we're looking at canopy gaps because it is mostly a forested park, although a lot of it's invasive canopy. So that's for tree planting. For understory plantings, which we're starting to get into more lately, that hasn't been as much of our process until recently. We're kind of targeting places where we've already had some success establishing canopy and now looking at can we fill in a lower layer and worry about some of the invasives on the ground that we weren't worrying about before. And then also wetland sites. Hybrid does a lot of natural and sort of artificial seeps, so that allows us to target those for understory. And then what I generally look at when I'm like getting more into like which species will fit where on a site is the light conditions, like from the edges of the gaps towards the center. That can vary, obviously, whether how dry or wet they are, and then soil pH is a huge one. We have a lot of concrete and asphalt, and a lot of it gets dumped in the park, and that can lead to some really alkaline soils. So that can really limit the species that we use in certain sites. And this is just a map of some planting sites that we've done in the southern half of the northern half of Highbridge Park that we manage in the last few years. So in terms of like this getting the actual species mixes, a lot of this is based on like the forest management framework and the native planting guide that Parks has developed. I've used those a lot in terms of developing these species mixtures, but I want to go for diversity above all. I think we don't really know very well as like a species what is going to do well in the future if we're planting stuff. I mean, humans, like we're not very good at this. So if we can get like a big diversity of species planted, that's going to give the site more resilience in the future, and not just like different names of species, but like species that grow to different heights in the forest, species that have different successional stages, some that grow faster, some that are longer lived and grow slower. And then ranges of shade tolerance, because a lot of these sites start out really sunny, but as time goes on, they're going to get more shady. So we want to be planting shade tolerant species as well. We're working in hybrids basically within the historical oak hickory forest. So I want to make sure that I have a good amount of oaks and hickories in the plantings. And then like Chris said, we're planting these hybrid American Chinese chestnuts because chestnuts were everywhere here, but obviously because of the blight, they went away. So that's some of our chestnuts again. Hybrids does have some cool, like unique little ecotypes that allow us to do some interesting things. We have, I think Christy talked about this, like just in general in urban parks, there's pretty alkaline or compacted soils that mean that certain trees that may not have historically been super widespread can do pretty well, like some of these. And we have a ton of American elms in our park actually too. So some of them seem to be doing okay. I'm not sure how, but we're trying to propagate from those larger trees and see if those can actually survive Dutch elm disease. And then we have a ton of seeps, like I mentioned. Highbridge has like a pretty intact hydrologic system for a city park. That's what salamanders are there. And so that can allow us to plant some wetland species as well. In terms of sourcing plant material, I've also learned a ton today about this, and I definitely want to get some new sources from those of you who are presenting about that. So that's been really cool because I'm new to PRISM. But we work with the Greenbelt Native Plant Center in Staten Island, and they source things very locally. And then, as Christy was saying, the Natural Resources Group actually contracts nurseries to grow out some of the Greenbelt seed source, and so they make that stuff available to us, which is really helpful. We also work with commercial native plant nurseries. And then we've been propagating more internally as well. We don't have a ton of space. We have less space than this property. So that can be tricky, but we're doing some transplanting, like tree rescues, I guess, from our gardens and our landscape areas where we don't necessarily want a hickory or an oak growing. We'll take that and then put it in a restoration site. And then we'll collect seeds and acorns and nuts and grow those things out. And we're doing a little bit of experimenting with propagation from cuttings as well. In terms of like the actual site planting logistics, we use a 3 to 5 foot tree spacing, which is based on this research that the Parks Department has done. And the goal is to like get canopy cover quickly. That's kind of the whole thing. 3 to 5 feet also allows us to come through with a weed whacker regularly because we're doing some mechanical maintenance. I think if it's a lot closer than that, it becomes more hard to maintain these sites, especially because they're so steep. Speaking of, we do, the whole park is basically slope. So I find it you've been doing this already before I started, but planting on a flattening the soil around what you plant rather than like planting it growing on the same angle as the slope naturally has. Number one, it traps water, which is, I think, especially for the understory stuff, super important. And then number two, I think for the bigger trees, it keeps them from just like falling out of the soil if they were like growing out of a really slanted slope. Does that make sense what I'm talking about? Like making a flat area? Yeah, go ahead. No, we're not. Yeah, we've done a little bit of like sulfur amendments for alkalinity, but that's kind of the only like soil amendments that we've done. Oh, and mulching, duh. The very next point. Yeah, we do mulch. That will help drop the pH sometimes and just hold in water. I think mulching is always great. We try to avoid supplemental watering, but with these understory plantings, like especially lately, it's been very dry. So I've been doing some supplemental watering. I do a ton of tree protection. I spend a lot of time putting these plastic cages around trees. And we don't have deer, so you may be like, what's the point? Well, we have those groundhogs that Chris mentioned. A lot of the like trees that are like the 7-gallon trees that have big trunks already when we plant them, they just like to gnaw on them. I think it's because their teeth are just always growing or something. I don't know. I don't think they're necessarily trying to eat them. They're just like trying to chew on something. And then it's also to protect them from us because we're always out there with weed whackers and hedge trimmers, and especially like somebody who just started as a seasonal employee last month might not be as aware of what's, this looks nice right now, but when this is overgrown with knotweed and porcelainberry, you're not going to see where the trees are. So you could easily just nick them with a weed whacker and girdle them, So that's a big reason why we do the tree protection. And then like Chris was saying, it's very intensive mechanical repeated cutting. And we're going to be like doing this for an extended period of time after we plant the site. So we're doing a little bit less upfront prep and more like after the fact. Go ahead.
What's it mulch?
It's kind of like whatever we can get, honestly. I wish we could produce it ourselves because I know that it's the source of like external. Yeah, we use wood chips or we use more finely ground at times. We use leaf litter mulch too. And then when I'm actually seeding, I'll try to use like leaf litter that I find in the park and like rake it over instead of, because I'm doing the seeding in the fall, so there's a bunch of leaf litter anyway. But yeah. So that's that. Hopefully I didn't run too far over, Brent. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Lights, please. Right, Linda, can you get the lights next to you, please? Oh, waiting the lights. Someone else turned it off back there. Let's do it again. There we go. All right. There's going to be lots of questions. We have lunch break. There's going to be a plant sale. So round of applause, first of all, to all the presenters and Hilltop. Good job. Well, you want to say something about the thing I'm holding?
Yes, those are the plant pictures I've got available. I think I've got 400 of them, so if you want them, let me know.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn things over to Adam in a second, but you all are familiar with the presenters' faces now, all the Hilltop staff. So use this time to mingle and meet people that you are interested in talking, having more questions on, and I guess that's it. I'm going to turn it over to you, Adam, as to what is. There is no time. I know that there's a one. John, you want to stick with 1:15? For there's a beach leaf disease coalition meeting. We're going to talk about a lot of issues impacting beech trees, next steps that the coalition is taking. There is a group that regularly meets, but everyone's like welcome to come and listen in on that meeting. But the formal meeting time is officially over. So I'm just, if people want to go check out the plant sales, have lunch, and just like, this is just an opportunity to like, loose agenda, whatever you want to do. We have the space, I guess, until 2. Okay. All right, cool. Emily, you have the floor.
The boxes that are open, only the boxes that are open, and they have pictures of the plant on front of them. Those are all the doors. All of the granulates are.
Hey guys, hold on 1 second. Just could I just have quiet just for 30 more seconds? Go ahead, Emily.
Granulates are behind, like near the tree of heaven, and Lindsay's gonna be stationed there. Only the first row, because the row behind it are all new parts. And then there's more up on the hill. Lily, she has tickets. We thought the easiest thing is to we'll fill out tickets, and then so there's no backlog at the cash register. Adam can pick you up. I'll be by the farm stand, so either find me or Lily to write your ticket, and Adam will take the 25% off of the register. I think that's all. And Lindsay's there we're all here to answer questions.
Questions, ask us questions, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, wait, it's very important. You have to grab your tray. The only way to carry the plugs is if you get an empty plug tray, and in front of each species, there are little tags. You put your own tags in. And we're only selling them in bundles of 5, and they can be mixed, or a whole tray. Either tray or bundles of 5.
Simple, right?
Yeah. And there's 3-inch pots over by Martin, but only you have the plug. Thank you.